how many people do we have to lose before enough is enough? And you see, enough being enough is not just about the killings. No, because as long as you don't prioritize our issues, we're still going to step into the streets. Because what option do we have, right? What option do we have? I felt like my voice needed to be heard, right? And it wasn't the first time I was in the streets. I know it was the first time for a lot of people, but I've been in the streets for many times before that, and I think, and my art is protest. My art is protest art, is liberation art. So every day of my life I'm protesting, right? Even dressed the way I'm dressed, like it's part of that statement of defiance. Because I feel like we have social contract with the government, right? The citizens do, and clearly the Kenyan government is not listening to its people, right? And that needs to change. So we had already tried all the other available avenues of communication. People did petitions. People wrote emails. People tried to reach out to their leaders, and their leaders were like, we're still going to vote in this finance bill, right? So if your leaders don't listen to you, what else do you do, right? So then we have to, the business has to stop, right? And so for me, I felt like I as somebody who believes in the values that are and the provisions of the Constitution, then I had every reason to be in the streets. I was as much surprised, I think, as even the politicians were, because I'm one of those people who've been howling in the jungle, like it's the lone wolf howling in the jungle, like trying to get people to listen and become active citizens, right? I've written and performed and showed up in the street since I think 2013, 2014, right? And for the most part, it felt like people weren't listening, right? And then it even was so when it came to the 2022 elections. A lot of young people just decided not to vote, and they seemed very unbothered from what's happening in the country. So for a lot of people who've been active citizens all through the years, it almost felt like this country, like if the young people are not involved in the politics, like this country, like it's just like people are feeling disillusioned. Nobody saw the all 6 months like sort of radicalization on TikTok and everything happening. So even for me, I was surprised, but it was pleasant surprise, because I was like, finally, here is a generation that is listening, that is willing to listen to what we've been saying. I think the role that social media has played is really like opening up the space, not just the democratic space, but also the communication, right? It's kind of like, I think for the longest time, people have been saying, technology has made the globe, has made it into the world into a global village, and it, it's, for the most part, it just felt like a far-fetched, statement, right? Until the protest happened, and then that finally you could see how that happened, because it happened so fast, right? It's and I think that it's a good thing, right? It's a good thing that something can happen right now, and in the next 5 minutes, somebody in Lodwar knows this has happened. Somebody in Mombasa knows this has happened. Somebody in LA or London or Beijing knows this has happened, right? Um, and of course, there's always the concern around dependency, especially based on the fact that we don't own the infrastructure. We don't own these platforms, right? These platforms are owned by the West, and we know they have their own agendas, right? They're owned, well, some are owned by the West, some are owned by the East, the Oriental, the China and other places, and they all have their agendas. So yeah, of course, there's a concern around the dependency. So I think in the long run, then we have to think about how do we come up with our own platforms? How do we lay down measures to ensure that we're not entirely dependent, such that if they decide, right, to sabotage that, because they are the ones who own the software anyway, they are the ones who own the architecture, then how do we get to go around that? And I think that's because looking at how technology is becoming more and more like a part of our lives, then we have to think through that. We have to think around, like, what happens if, for example, if everything shut down today, how do we go about our business, right? Because we can't base everything virtual, like on a virtual platform. How and as much as it's beneficial to us now, we have to think through to the point where, what if this wasn't there, right? And I think there's enough post-apocalyptic films and like books and literature to kind of get people concerned about how that might pan out. So we need to be prepared either way. I'm not sure if there's a Kenyan who hasn't. Directly, I can't say. Yeah, I've maybe not in this protest, like not directly. Like, okay, I've, of course, if I'm stepping out in the streets, I would hope not to get tear gassed, right? Right. I would hope not to endure the water cannons and all that. I would hope not to go through the police baton. So I personally can say, like, I've been physically assaulted, right, outside of the tear gas and the water cannons. But I, of course, I've seen the violence, right? I've seen police like shoot the water cannons into people's houses, residential houses, right? And tear gas people. I haven't seen anybody get shot directly, but I've seen it in footage, right? I've seen them beat people down, and kill people, right? Not on one, but like a lot of that has been captured in the previous protest last year and this year. I lost my phone last year in the streets, and I got a bit, um, assaulted by some goons along Thika Road, because I was recording what was going on. So, um, uh, but at the same time, you look at it, some people lost their lives, right? Some people were hospitalized. So maybe my experience is not that special, but at the same time, it happened. It's almost hilarious when the government makes certain claims, when it's been captured on tape, and when information has been leaked out that they're the ones who are organizing guns, right? No ordinary person has, like, very few ordinary people have the money to pay off goons anyway, right? And a lot of goons, like, to have that much audacity, it means like somebody in a position of power has guaranteed you immunity, right? I don't have any immunity to guarantee anybody. For the most part, all protesters were peaceful, right? And even for the guys who came, because when people are starving, sometimes you don't even need the goons to do much. You just need them to unlock the doors, because there's a lot of people in the streets who are starving. Of course, if somebody's looking like there's food here, they're not just going to leave the food, right? I think that's a way of government trying to legitimize the protest and make us look bad in the court of public opinion, or yet we are the public anyway. But also there, but of course when they do that, our mothers or parents, and they're like, oh no no, you guys should not go. We're not the ones doing it, but of course because they look that way, they're going to make it seem like we're the ones doing it, right? And I think uh, we should have learned by now, because these tricks have been used since the colonial times, right? Maybe the colonialists called them Mau terrorists, right? And demonized them in schools. My grandmother thought, she was in primary school in that emergency era, right? And if you talk about the Mau, she was like, you should have seen them when they came out of the forest. They looked like devils, right? So that's the kind of image that had been sold to them. And even in her old age, she couldn't, right, see it beyond there. So I think we have to look at that for what it is, which is government propaganda, right, to demonize the protests and to make us look bad. Yet they're the ones who are killing us anyway, right? They're the ones who are shooting us down. They're the ones who are abducting people. So who needs to answer for what, right? It's like they're putting us to task without putting themselves to task. I think Albert Ojwang's death is sort of what the people in the legal profession call they call a class action. A class action is when there's different victims, and then they need to go to court, but you need a face, right? You need a face, and I think so. People are already preparing for 25th, right? People already prepared that on 25th, this is our national holiday. Whether gazetted or otherwise, we are stepping into the streets to honor the people we lost last year, and at the same time to represent our issues, right? Because the government hasn't responded to the issues we were raising since the reject finance bill protest last year, right? So and I think so when this guy is abducted Albert Ojwang, right, taking him away from his parents and his wife and his kid, and locked him up and tortured him and eventually killed him. People are already agitated. People already just added fuel to the fire, right? And I think so it just something that was going to blow up anyway. They just what they did is like trying to detonate a bomb and then getting the wrong wire and setting it up. So and I think his story is just an illustration of how not just reckless, right, but how tone deaf the state is right now, like the Kenyan state is. Because how many people do we have to lose before enough is enough? And you see, enough being enough is not just about the killings. No, because as long as you don't prioritize our issues, we're still going to step into the streets. Because what option do we have, right? What option do we have? I don't know what the end of it will be, but it just means more people are going to be dead, right? And probably just and the whole fabric of the Kenyan state also need to be reevaluated, right? Because people every day, with every killing, every abduction, every assault by the police, people are losing faith in the police force. And I don't think the government even is thinking through to figure out what that actually means, right? For me, any system is only as strong as the faith its subjects has in it. If people lose faith in that system, right? Because if I trust people if I trust thugs more than I trust the cops, because the cops are even the bigger thugs, because not only are they stealing and killing me, they're actually certified to steal and kill from me, to kill me, right? then what are you telling me? Right? So it means now I have to start thinking around what happens now if, so I know you're there, right? And I know this is somewhere I need to be, but I don't trust you, right? I don't feel safe around you. What am I going to do? Then it means anytime I'm coming to face you, then I have to come with the notion that this might end up badly, and I also need to protect myself, right? So I think if these guys are being rational, right? If and I'm saying that the state, the politicians, if they're being rational, they should be very worried about the Pandora's box they're opening, you know, because they're opening a can of worms here that is going to spill over on everybody's table, and it's just going to be messy and messy with time. As an artist, as a writer and a performer, is by one writing about them, is and honoring their memory, like in writing, because we have to immortalize their sacrifices, right? Because that's what they are. Right? Could have easily been me, could have easily been you, right? And I would hope that people, like the people stay. If it were me, I would hope that the people stay behind, honor what I stood for, what I died for, right? And so part of that is chronicling these experiences, is documenting these experiences, and at the same time, like honoring the dignity and the humanity, because part of the government treating us the way it's treating us is trying to dehumanize us, right? But also part of honoring that humanity is making sure we don't let them determine the narrative we tell, right? It's like we take charge of the narrative ourselves, right? So we have to make sure they don't forget all these people, right? And because also part of that is how we make a case for ourselves, right? When you're shooting down people, innocent people, like peaceful protesters, and all the violence that is being met on people, like even in their own homesteads and residential areas, killing, like how many children, like this time round, how many children have been buried? High school kids. How reckless, like, does a state has to be, right? Because, and you can tell me there's nothing like a stray bullet when you're shooting directly towards buildings, occupied buildings, right? If you're shooting towards an occupied building or anywhere that there are people, it means you're hoping that bullet is going to hit something or somebody, right? So if we shot up in the air, because a stray bullet goes up in the air, right? Anything you shoot directly towards people, that's not a stray bullet. That is a well-intended, shot that's meant to hit something or somebody. So I think also in terms of how these people frame the narrative, these are some of the questions we need to start asking, right? We had the cop who is accused of killing Rex Masai. Is denying himself. Like he went to court and said, no, that's not me. 50 million Kenyans can see your pictures and you on video, right? And it's you. But I think because lawyers have to, represent you anyway, and your lawyer has to advise you the best way to get out of the case. Like, so, you just deny and deny and deny, right? But it's clear to everybody that's you, right? You're saying you're not in the streets. You are in the streets. You are captured on video, on picture, in the streets. But you're telling us it's not you, right? So, and I think that's part of the whole. We've seen the president do severally, like, and now it's kind of reflecting across the board. Is the gaslighting, right? It's like, you're telling us the kind of things that we're the ones now. So you're trying to make us even question ourselves, like question what we believe is the truth. I think as Kenyans, we have to refuse, like we have to be critical enough that we can't have the villains in our lives determine how we see our stories, right? We can't let them drive us into questioning our own sanity and questioning our truth. We start going down the historical rabbit hole, then there's already a TJRC report that highlights so many other people who've endured state-sanctioned violence and and abuse and social injustices, who have not seen justice to date. So you can't, those people, there's nothing. The best you can do is try to maybe make up a little for that, but you can't really give them justice anymore, right? You can't give them justice, like, because it's already delayed. And that's a question that was asked last year after the protests, is a question that being asked even now. And I like that I've seen a lot of young people starting to organize themselves into movements, maybe not a political party exactly, but into movements now, like because what we need is alternative leadership, right? Because if for example the people's will is achieved and Ruto steps down, right, or maybe even through the ballot we kick him out, then we also need an alternative government. And it's a government, and the government we need is not a government where we are recycling the same old garbage leadership, because we're just going to find ourselves here a few years down the line, right? Sometimes I cut the young people some slack, because hey, they're working with all they have. They're actually doing a lot of good, and they're doing very well, all things considered, because they weren't prepared for this, right? They didn't happen in a vacuum. And I think so when even I hear some of the older people saying, no, the Gen Z movement, it's not about the Gen Zs. Is that the Gen Zs have pushed it beyond where the other generations left. Of course, because there have been people who've been fighting injustices and these kinds of things since time immemorial. So even it gets me a bit. It makes me feel a certain way when young people say, like, we're not like our parents, because I don't know who we are talking about, because of maybe not your parent directly, but there are people in your parents' generation who are fighting. There were people in Nyayo chambers, there were even in the 2010s and all that. There are people who have been protesting, because I've been a part of that. And you can go back, there was the Mau Mau, then you can go back before the Mau Mau, there was the Mekatilili or Menzas, in her 60s, she broke out of prison huku Nyanza, akaenda mpaka Pwani miguu, right? And went to mobilize people using dance and music, right? So when we say we're not like our ancestors, which ancestors are we talking about, right? Because there were the Dedan Kimathis, the Mariamas, and then those, like, and the Mudoni Kiremas. So I think sometimes you also have to realize we're not really the first ones to do this. Maybe not I think maybe the scope is bigger, right? Because there's more people now who are involved, but also I think the context also demands that. But at the same time, you have to remember there were people like Mudhoni Nyanjiro, when Ari Tuk was arrested and locked up by the Central Police wakati kwa Kingsway Police Station, and there was like 8,000 people who were protesting, demanding Ari Tuku's release, right? And Mudhoni Nyanjiro looking at the men and saying, because they were kind of holding back, like, if you men cannot go out there and get our leader released, mtupatie tu hizo toja zenyu, sisi tuvae tuende tupigane, unaona. And that, you can imagine about that, how emasculating and daring that was at that time. So the men were forced to, and she was amongst the first people to drop. There were about 300 people were killed on that day, right? 1922. So we're not the first ones here. And I think with that understanding, then it means that even in terms of now organizing for us, and whether we are forming political parties, whether we are forming a movement that get together to take back our power and take over power, then we have to do it with an awareness that we're not the first ones here, right? because 2002 also, when Kibaki gets into power, Kenya is considered one of the happiest countries in the world, right? Because people are very hopeful. But then that they forgot about being vigilant. They forgot about, like, it's one thing to get to kick Moi out, but it's a whole other thing to make sure that the leaders who take after that are held to account, right? And so because people relaxed and got caught up in the euphoria, then roll over a few years down the line, and here we are again, with one of Moi's proteges, replaying, the same script that Moi applied back then, right? Of course, we have a different constitution now, and that's why we have now to make sure. And I love that when a lot of young people are talking, that they're basing their arguments on the constitution, because the constitution we have now is not the same constitution that Moi had, and that is what protects us. Right now, what's happening is a bad pains, and I hope that we stay focused and we don't lose vision. Of course, there's a lot of distractions. Also, there's a lot of sabotage. There's a lot of betrayal in the process, which is always expected anyway, right? Because people are going to be threatened. People are going to be bought off, and of course, a lot of people are hungry. You can't argue with an hungry stomach, like so. So that's always going to be a challenge. But also, we have to anticipate these challenges, right? And come up with ways to counter that. Because the government, you can be sure, like the state right now is working day and night to ensure that they curtail whatever progress we have made, right? And to counter whatever organizing and action that we are carrying forward. So we also have to make sure we are ahead of the game, in that anytime they pull this kind of things, we also have a counter for that. And that means we have to shut out the noise, because there's a lot of noise as well, right? In terms of even know who's the trusted voice, because it's like going on Twitter, and probably out of every 10 tweets, there's probably one government paid blogger, right? So you have to know which people represent our concerns, and which people are speaking in our voice, and who's just here to, get us distracted and confuse us. 2022 was a very, for any active Kenyans, it was a very, it was a very hopeless situation, because a lot of us felt like, what is the way forward now, right? But then when the protest happened, then that was the hope, right? And the fact that we're still here and we're fighting, and the revolution doesn't happen in a day. And actually, the revolution doesn't even happen in the streets. Before people step in the streets, the revolution happens in the mind, right? It's more that than, because also if we can step into the streets, but unless we've liberated our minds, emancipated our minds from the old ways, then we are going to pretty much like revert back to that. So essentially, what are you saying, right? It's not like, we're not talking one of those countries you hear like there hasn't been any shooting for the last decade, or no. We're talking about where just today their parents were burying their children because they were shot in the protest, right? So and you see how much that takes away from the responsibility even for the police, because the police have a responsibility, right? There is the police are also trained, right? So if you can't mitigate an issue without shooting somebody down, like, what is the training for? Also, like, and so when people saying like we need to reevaluate even the policing system in this country, that's exactly what they're pointing at. You shoot somebody in the leg, it sounds better than kill them, shoot and kill them, right? But at the same time, the next day we have this other rabid Koech guy saying, yeah, no, I know the president said shoot them. No, shoot them, right? I would love to see one of these people like have that barrel pointed to their head and claim the same thing, because I have this thing where I feel like, if you really want to play gangster, because that's what a lot of these politicians do, they want to play gangster, then do the gangster thing and own up, right? because you're out here like talking like, it's like you're bulletproof, right? It's like everybody else can get shot and bleed and die, but you can't. I think unless anybody, unless you're putting yourselves in the feet of the person who's on the receiving end, then I don't care what you're saying. Like I think because a lot of these politicians, they talk from their ivory towers, right, and their high horses, because they will never find themselves in the front lines, right? But also there's some of them who've been in the streets before. So if the same thing had happened to you, you wouldn't even be here anyway, right? But it's because there's a constitution that stipulates, and there are policies that stipulate how policing should be done, right? And what's the rights and responsibility. And the thing is, even as a police person, if you take off your uniform, who are you? You're a citizen, right? So if you're a police, a central police, and you go to coast as a civilian, the policemen in the coast don't know you're a police person, right? So if they decide not to give you the benefit of doubt, they wouldn't know, right? So, and that's the reason why we have a constitution that lays down this is how things should happen. But of course, when people are trying to instigate chaos, they start making it, and obviously, no, they see the constitution. The constitution has been violated. Like this government, it's just like we are like 3.5 years in, and this government has violated the constitution in ways we haven't seen before, right? And because even part of when it comes to the right to protest, the only reason even people are required to go and alert the police that we're going to protest on this particular day is so that the police can provide protection, right? It's not so that the police can offer permission. The constitution gives us the permission to protest. It's not the whatever the OCS or the OCPD or whoever was supposed to allow us to protest. No. By the time we're protesting means we're already not being listened to anyway. So we're just letting them know so that they can provide security for the protest. But what have we seen? We have seen the police and goons working hand in hand. Police supervising goons beat down peaceful protesters, right? We've seen police caught on camera carrying stolen goods from shops that have been broken into, right? We've seen police shoot tear gas canisters, live rounds, water cannons on peaceful protesters, yet look away when goons are breaking into shops and supermarkets, right? So that just tells you the right to protest in this country is not being upheld, not because it's not there, but because the government has no intention, to serve its mandates as the people's representative, right? And that's just tragic. It's unfortunate, but at the same time, I think it's there for every Kenyan of goodwill to see, right, and know what they think about you, how they perceive you, right? It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be angry. But at some point, you have to let reason, take charge, right? Because it's like we went to the ballot emotionally, right? It's like we went to the ballot to punish somebody. And here we are. We are the ones, we're the ones who are facing the blunt of things, right? I'm not saying like the alternative was any better, right? But there was more than one alternative. I think there's so many untold stories. It's only until this week that we saw like the footage of the young people who are locked up in Thika. I think in a police station in Thika, that were arrested on Sabasaba, right? And you see, we only know about that because somebody went to the police station and took a video of it. You can imagine, because there were people protesting across the country on these different days, on either June 25th or Saba Saba and all the other protests. How many people are being held in by the police, or even abducted, or even killed, that we don't know about? It's so many, right? And I know sometimes people are scared even to accept that maybe the worst has happened, because you don't want it to have happened, right? But also it means like there's a lot to be done, even in terms of ensuring that the rights to life, the rights of you, even as an arrested person, right? And at the same time, even abductions, like there was, you see, part of back in the day, you could be arrested and charged, indefinitely, because there wasn't a provision for that in the Constitution. But now we have a Constitution that doesn't allow that. So the only thing that is left is now for the police, the DCI people, to arrest you, and so that way it's not on record that you're actually under arrest, because if you're on record, but also even when it's on record, then they're violating those particular rights of arrested people by keeping people in police cells without releasing them, because you're not supposed to keep me in police cells beyond 24 hours, right?
Oya, blesi imefungwa. Oya, acha kumkimbiza.